Welcome to RecLess, a podcast making people smarter and more knowledgeable about parks and recreation. Your hosts are Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country, bringing their own unique and sometimes entertaining perspectives with a surprise guest each episode. This is RecLess.
I made some pizza last night. Came out amazing.
What'd you put on it? Like, let's see, pineapple and
fried
olives.
pickle chips and peanut butter. Your pizzas look like you're pregnant.
The base you may not approve of, but there was a mac and cheese under the.
No.
Yeah, there was mac and cheese under the
pizza.
cheese.
Welcome to RecLess. This is technically our 22nd episode, and today I'm Hannah Mize, and joining you guys today as a guest host as we go through and we present a wrap-up and a recap of all of our greatest moments and favorite moments of the last season. So before we get started, I'm very excited to say that you guys now have the opportunity to stream and listen to our podcast on most of the main streaming platforms: Apple, Amazon, Audible, and of course, YouTube, Spotify. So please give us a listen. We're so glad that you guys are here. Today, I'm joined by, as always, our hosts, Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro. How's it going, guys?
Great. It's great. We're excited for this show here, Hannah. That was a great intro. And also as our publicist, a great plug for the great exciting news that we have to come about being on those other different platforms.
Yeah, and as you mentioned the number, we made it past the hump. We actually have gotten past that threshold that we joked about, that if we can get there, hey, we're kicking and we're going to keep going at it.
The question is, do you have a surprise guest for us today? That's what the host does.
I did understand the assignment, and I did have a surprise guest lined up, and then they canceled at the last minute. So unfortunately, I'm the surprise guest today. Surprise! So apologies for that.
That would have been a twist if that
That
was.
would've been
I know.
Yeah.
I had a whole thing ready to go. So I've had to pivot a little bit. So sorry about that. It was going to be a lot of fun. But meanwhile, I'm super pumped to say we do have more than 2 listeners, as has been joked about several times during this season. This is technically our 22nd episode. So yay, can't believe it. We're getting ready for season 2. And I put together a couple of numbers as the person behind the scenes that pulls together a lot of these different things and helps with distribution and editing and all of that. So currently we have 611 followers combined with LinkedIn and YouTube and some of our other platforms. And we have up to date, as of yesterday, a little over 3,000 listens. So we are getting out there, and we do have people that are listening. So it's quite exciting.
Melissa listens to each episode at least 10 times. Hannah, another 20 during the edits. So, but no, that's great. That's really great news.
Count Jack and Amelia in the room, that's doubling up as well.
Technically, the edits don't count. So I am happy to say we do have some listens. So I do have a question for us, though, to get us all started. I can't be the host and not have a question. So do you guys have any New Year's resolutions? I know Shane's probably going to say no. I usually start with a New Year's resolution, and then I fizzle really, really quickly. But do you guys have a New Year's resolution?
I'm not a New Year's resolution person, but I am trying to read more books this year. I don't know if I'd say it's a resolution. It's something I've enjoyed to do as I've gotten older, is reading more books. So I'm going to try to see how many I can get in a year. We'll see this time next year how well I did.
And I think for a change, I actually agree with Shane, and we're on the same page about something, which doesn't happen super often. But
Newsflash.
Yeah, it's odd. Maybe we're kicking off the new year on a new foundation.
It's going to be a beautiful year.
Or brotherly love. No, I don't actually have a big history of doing any New Year's resolutions either. But I would echo Shane. Like, I'll get a book, or someone will recommend a book, and I'll look into it and I'd be like, oh, that sounds really good. But then I never follow through with it. So maybe I will follow his footsteps and try to do that as well.
I'm already one in, so you're behind, buddy.
Yep.
Well, let me, I'll go here and just say maybe that's your New Year's resolution, Jay, is to be more like Shane. I mean, it sounds like that's what you said. And so In reality, I find that I'm a little bit in the middle of all of you there too. I'm not really a big, and Hannah, I think I'm more with you than anybody. I always have some kind of New Year's resolution that I start, and typically for me, goals and objective personally or professionally, they kind of just happen organically throughout the year. But yeah, I fizzle out a little bit. I guess this is a very typical and boring answer, but I turned 40 this past year. I've seen my family go through some challenges. So I see that there's a little bit more, I don't know the best way to say it, but there was a feeling of invincibility, right? When you were younger. And I could see that life is just very fragile. So just trying to be a little more healthy. I don't know what I can do. I guess barbecue pizzas aren't going to
Maybe
help
not barbecue pizza.
the effort with mac and cheese on them, but whatever else I could do, that's something I'd like to try. I want to be around and be healthy for the kids.
Well, moving along to our questions and diving into this episode.
Do the 8 listeners know what this episode is? It's our wrap up. It's our best of. Is that right?
It is our wrap up and our best of. Is there anything else you would like to say about that?
No, I was just trying to confirm.
I think she said it earlier, but maybe Shane wasn't listening.
I'm trying to interrupt podcasts more as well in 2024. So
I appreciate that. Please give me more to have to edit. That makes me really, really happy. So this is our recap and our best of episode. And like we've said previously, we have had 21 different guests throughout this first season. We're getting ready to start season 2. But before we jump into season 2, we wanted to revisit some of our favorite moments of season 1. So with that, what was your very favorite moment of season 1?
All right, I'll start off. I've been given a few nicknames during the course of our fun little experiment.
Just a couple.
One of them being Tommy 2 Questions.
What's up? How's Tommy 2 Questions?
Nickname aside, I'm here.
No second question.
No.
All
right.
My 2-part questions have been flagged and are no longer coming.
Yeah. So let me just really quickly make a quick public service announcement. And honestly, I'm just giving you a preface here. Just about every answer to the questions that we're likely going to be facing, I'm going to have probably 2 or 3 answers. So, I don't know if 3 is acceptable. So, and I want to be honest here too. My favorite moment it was tough. I think for all of us, that's going to be tough to say, oh, this was my favorite moment. I do have one that I did pull out, but moments, plural. All of our guests had some amazing things to say, and our conversations couldn't have been any more enjoyable or flowed any better than I really couldn't have imagined that, right? So I've just really enjoyed that. Banter with you guys is right up there. What are we, 7 of 8 now for Bill's mentions?
You missed it last pod.
I think we missed one. Yeah. So
we did miss one, and as much as Tom didn't want to talk about the Bills, he's the one that's bringing them up more than half the time. So it's his fault.
Insecurity.
I want to bring a smile to Jay's face. That's it. It's very simple.
That'll do it.
So again, those are more moments, plural, but I've had some really, really fun experiences with 2 people, 3 also, including Hannah, and getting my wife involved into the mix on this, to just have this kind of be like this little, I don't know, it's a kind of a family effort here. And you guys, it's been great working with you. So, we always said this at the beginning. We had a pretty good relationship going into this experiment, but we also didn't really, how often would we speak and stay in touch prior to this? Maybe once a month if we were lucky, not during the busy times. So to be in touch with you guys as often as I have has been amazing. I've learned more about you than maybe I care to know, but I have enjoyed it. And so now I'll transition to that. Those are the cop-out answers. Perhaps one of my favorite moments, maybe an answer to one of your questions, but it was during Jill Geller's episode, but it was during our wrap-up conversation. Jill has, 30 plus years of phenomenal experience, just an exemplary professional in this field. But that was the first guest that I went out on a limb on and said, gee, I don't know that Shane or Jay have a prior relationship with this guest. In fact, I'm pretty certain that they don't. It was the first time we went away from some familiarity. And I didn't know how that was going to go. And to hear both of your reactions in the discussion afterwards, really put a validation to the fact that it was something that we could do this show, and we didn't have to have a crutch or people that we all know. I think that's going to help us live long with this show. And Jill was a great guest, and it was something that was a fond memory of mine in this show in our progression and growth.
I almost chose her as my surprise, literally because she was probably the only person I had almost no real working knowledge of before. She was amazing. I enjoyed that episode thoroughly.
Well, as expected, Tom had multiple answers, and some of them were, heartfelt, and some of them were just for fun. So Tommy Two Questions lives on to another season.
The alliteration works with 3 as well, right? 3 starts with a T. So Tommy 3 Questions can work just as well as Tommy 2 Questions, though.
How about Tommy 20? How's that?
That's right. That works as well.
That's a fun game, guys. I don't know if we should play that game one day on the show with one of our guests.
We do like games once in a while.
20 questions is basically how we start every show. That's how we introduce our guests.
Essentially.
Anyway,
yeah, pretty much. It's probably nearly impossible to pick a favorite moment. I went back, I was like looking at all the guests and thinking about all the episodes. And early on, our conversation with Janet kind of like stuck in my head because it was really unique that we started a conversation with Chris Nunes about mentoring, and then it carried over to a conversation about mentoring with Janet. And I loved how that carried over. This was obviously like super early in the season. But, Janet had mentioned in that episode that she's always been more of a formal, or not always been a formal mentor, where people just reach out to her and recommend her.
I've always seen mentoring as having helped me more than what I've actually done to help others. I've been a lot less of a formal mentor for professionals than I have maybe an informal mentor. I don't know how that works, but I just know that I don't sign up, but people look at me as someone who has assisted them with their careers. And it's been quite a joy to have the career that I've had. Like, I fell into this job. It's been amazing. I wouldn't ever take any of it back. I love, love, love this field, and anything I can do to learn and grow is always a part of it. I've had some really great mentors, and Chris Nunes is one of them.
And I think what stuck in my head for that conversation in that moment was that's really the definition of our profession. There's so many situations that we randomly meet someone, or introduced to somebody, or hear about a program, or hear about a festival or an event, and then before you know it, you're talking to that person that runs that program, and everyone's just sharing everything. And that's what I love about this profession so much, is the willingness to help each other out. And it may not be like a formal mentor program or a formal platform, but everyone is just always so willing. That just stuck to me as a moment, just because it was the epitome of what we do all the time, is just share everything and be willing to help one another, because we all want to see the improvements that we make in Park and Rec for our communities around the country.
Yeah, Janet was a great episode, and I'm still quite tempted to just go buy a state conference pass to hear her story that Tom got to hear, because she kind of teased us with it. We haven't got to hear her keynote. For mine, I might have not understood the assignment a little bit, but my favorite moment was more of a discussion topic, and it was covered, I thought, really well by 2 people. It was the topic of AI, which I thought was super relevant and fascinating, really, to see that it can design program guides, and it can search things in your files, but it can also design artwork. It can help you create policies and procedures and resumes. And we heard a lot about that side of it from Ryan Hegerness on how he thought AI would really impact our industry. But then we got to talk to Nile about AI, and he had this concept of DEAI, which is input output, and the devastating effects I think we're seeing even sometimes in our culture right now, where if you're a certain political party, one way or the other, and you're leaning that way, you can follow those things on Twitter, and you can follow that news station that leans towards your group, and you can get really one-sided in this world. And the idea that AI, this really incredible tool that could do a lot of incredible things, could make you more prejudiced, potentially more insulated, more naive to the grander scale, was fascinating to me. And that the dangers of input output, and making sure that in some capacity as we're moving into how technology makes our life easier and makes our life better, really does make our life more convenient and better, that we're still keeping a mind open to the fact that if I'm only looking up steak recipes and beef jerky and eggs and all the dumb crap I eat, or if you look at my algorithm on YouTube or whatever, that is things I'm interested in. That's not the only things I should be interested in though. You know what I mean? Like, I should also continue to look at a wider picture and see what a vegetable would do to my body, for example, right? So it's one of those things that, and if we can talk about that in a dietary sense, we can talk about that in our intake as far as what we're reading about, what we're studying, what we're consuming on a holistic level. And so it was very interesting to hear all these really cool things that Ryan was talking about DEI, and to have Neely come back and say, but be careful.
If you think of most people speaking today, they are in one or the other swim lane. Most people speak DEI, belonging, Jedi, you name it, or they're speaking AI. But I haven't still sort of come across that point in terms of how do we look at DEAI together, right? How do we marry inclusion and innovation together, right? Two of these core values that I think, because ultimately, here's the thing with all the progress in AI, if we leave people behind, what's the point?
And I really enjoyed those two conversations and how they really kind of wrapped up the good and the bad of AI.
I agree. A lot of the moments that you guys have mentioned have been really, really fantastic. I also have gotten to go back and hear all of these episodes because obviously I'm sitting and listening and editing and putting all of the episodes together. And still to this day, one of my very, very favorite episodes was Chris Bass. You guys the banter was super funny at the beginning of that episode. And then whenever he comes in with his drawl and starts talking, it was very, very charming, and I loved listening to his accent.
What's going on, guys? How's it going?
But then more than that, the conversation that he had about being really intentional, I don't know if that we even meant for that particular episode to have the theme of just intention, but it did. It was very intentional about networking and intentional about listening to the people that are around you, and really intentional about being present in whatever moment that you were in. And that episode really resonated with me. I've still to this time is one of my very favorite ones that we've done.
People don't realize we'll normally do this podcast on Friday. Hannah isn't always with us, obviously, and then she gets the computer. We record it to our laptop, our Mize laptop here, and Hannah starts to listen, usually that Friday night. And she wasn't into Chris Bass's a minute and a half, 2 minutes. I might have said this at the time, but she's not into it a minute or two. She pulls off the headphones and says, I'm going to love this episode. Like, I can already tell that this episode is going to be great. We're from the South, obviously, in Texas, and Chris isn't from Texas. He's from the eastern side of the country, but I don't know if it was just his draw, because she hadn't gotten into it long enough to hear a lot of the great things he talks about in that thing, but she was going to enjoy that episode. Chris was a great listen, for sure.
It's a great one. Great accent.
And what a lot of people obviously don't realize too is that as our editor, Hannah you probably remember and pick up certain tidbits of conversations that we don't, that are without re-listening to it over and over and over again. And you reminded me of one of my favorite moments. Again, I hate to give this will be very short. Chris Bass, at the end of the conversation, I don't know if you all remember, we started talking about professional wrestling. And now this is the second time I've talked about professional wrestling since that episode, talking work-life balance, and Chris is a big wrestling fan. Fun conversation.
So moving on, our most surprising moment of season 1.
So I'll go first. And I think my moment that came to mind when I was thinking about this was one of the guests that I brought in Kathy Capps. The thing about Kathy, and we all have history with Kathy. We knew her for a long time prior to doing this conversation with her, but we knew her in the platform of our traditional municipality, Park and Recreation. And Kathy is now in a different role, works for North Carolina State Parks. And, I've been to a handful of the state parks here in North Carolina, and I see the vast growth that they've had over the years.
Our
Okay.
annual visitation is somewhere around 20 million. And while that is spread across the entire park system, there are over 10 parks that see more than 1 million visitors a year.
But I had no knowledge whatsoever of the impact that they're doing statewide and the partnerships they have going on. And I think all of us like that work in municipality government, like we work on partnerships more on a local level, but to hear her talk about the partnerships that she creates that are statewide, you know, talking about working with the Department of Transportation and how they can do that to grow education and awareness for the state parks, it's just very unique. And going into it, like I just would never have thought of some of those partnerships that they have to do to make sure that they're getting more visibility across the state. So it was just a fun conversation, and it just kind of like made me think differently about the state park system. So it was very surprising and fascinating to look at it from the statewide perspective versus just going and being a user of state parks.
Yeah. Kathy was a great guest and definitely brought a perspective that we don't typically really highlight on the show or in general in the profession, right? We talk about being voices for our profession and making sure that there's some awareness of what we do because the story is impactful. The state park side of it is definitely underrepresented. So it was really great and, you know, welcome to have Kathy because we hadn't seen her and talked to her in a while as well. So, you know, for me, there was one very obvious, surprising moment of this season, and that was, you know, the unveiling of one of Shane's guests, Nathan Fort.
Let me introduce to you Nathan Fort. And he's live.
Surprise, everybody.
Wow.
Yeah, what do you
What's up,
think
Jared?
about
What's up,
that?
Tom? How are y'all?
Good. How you doing? This is a real surprise. A first.
Yeah.
A live guest in one of our own little studios.
That is very interesting.
He's got
I thought
family in
you like
Pflugerville.
when I saw him on your screen, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm really confused. Is there like some sort of like optical illusion going on right now?
How great is
What's
that?
going on, Nathan? How you doing, man?
Live in his office. Now, we did 2 live episodes in Dallas, but we were very, very aware that was going to happen. Shane obviously made RecLess history by having an actual guest right in his office. And I remember being extremely confused when he unveiled he had a 2-camera system, right? So there was phone or some other camera. I don't know what he did. He hired out some kind of production company. Who knows? He is the mad scientist as we went over a few episodes. But yeah, we're talking to Shane. He's given us the clues. Nathan, you know, it's outed that Nathan is our guest, and boom, the second camera goes and we could see Shane, we could see Nathan. Pretty great stuff. So that was definitely a surprise moment for me. And then as far as a surprise, two answers again.
Not surprised that we have 2 answers.
Yes, you should not be surprised. Michael Kirschman, and you know, I don't mean to go down that road, but of course Michael's great. I've since connected with him since conference and his guest appearance on our show. But I do have to say, you know, the conversation we had and the very sobering conversation about the mass shooting in Virginia Beach was certainly something that, you know, we go into a podcast doing this project, this pet project of ours. We expect it to be, you know, whatever you want to call it, all fun, all rainbows, all sports, you know, whatever it is that lights up your life. And that was an interesting conversation.
Well, it was interesting. I you know, after that, I talked to the director out in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
Vegas shooting. And we've talked to of course, Virginia Beach is now part of this club that nobody wants to be a part of.
Right, yeah.
And all the cities are learning from each other and calling each other when this happens and providing support and providing advice and recommendations. And while that's helpful, it's kind of sad at the same time that more and more cities are joining the club every day.
And it kind of goes back a little bit to, you know, my resolution of being healthier and being around and the fragility of what we do in life. It was a really great conversation. And when I remember when Shane first asked the question, my thought was, maybe we don't want to go down this road. But then what ended up happening was, you know, Michael eloquently really answered the question, and it was information. Yes, we don't want to think about it, but it is something we should be thinking about to know and be, I guess, cognizant of the fact that that it's out there. Ultimately, we took that conversation that we had here on this podcast and put that into the Academy's extern wrap-up conversations. So that ended up being one of the 5 topics. And it was really great. It was and Michael came back on.
I didn't know about that. Why didn't you invite me to that?
Well, you wouldn't. I don't think you would have came. Sometimes I give up when we invite you to those types of activities. But I was on the call where we planned, and that just was the first thing. They had asked me, "What are you speaking about on RecLess?" That seems to be a hot topic that maybe is something we should have in this roundtable, Shane's favorite type of forum.
Love it.
And I gave a few ideas. But that was ultimately one of them that they chose, and it was really just preparing yourself for disaster situations that maybe we all don't expect, but might want to be prepared for.
Well, I'll tell you that we are around each other too much now, because I wrote down on my little Remarkable tablet 5 things because I thought I need a backup in case someone goes before me. And I wrote one funny thing, which was maybe the most surprising moment was Tom's daughter making the family photo. That's a big deal. Big deal. We were all a little shook by that. So congrats to Amelia in the power rankings. She must be moving up. But my other surprising moments, I literally have written on this Remarkable right here. I'm showing y'all. Nate in studio. Chris talking about active listening and networking. That was from Hannah stealing it. Michael Kirschman handling tragedy. Kathy Capps, Blast from the Past, and Joe Geller. I knew very little about her before the episode. So we've covered everything. So I'm going to go off script here. Because as I was hearing every one of mine being taken, I was like, oh, crap, what did I say? We had a pretty cool experience at conference. First of all, it was definitely cool at conference to see people at least acknowledge the podcast in some way. Some people said they listened to it every episode, and we were laughing because we had like 4 listeners. So we're like, no, I think we all had about 100 people tell us they were active listeners, and we had like 8 solid listens. We were like, not all of y'all are listening to our podcast, but there was a moment which I think we can talk about. I think it's cleared, and I don't have anything else to say, so I'm going to talk about it. We had someone who was planning a state conference come up to Jay and I in a meeting and said, there's this incredible opportunity that could happen. And we're not going to use names, but someone who was planning a conference had reached out to Nick Offerman's contact and wanted Nick Offerman, who is, for those like Jay that don't know, he is Ron Swanson in Parks and Rec, the actor that
I know
Ron
now.
Swanson. Yeah. But they had reached out to his representation, and they wanted him to speak as a keynote for a conference, which is incredible. What a great keynote, by the way, in a fun way. I know it's not uplifting, but I'm sure he's got some great things to say, to be quite honest, in his career in Hollywood. They were going to bring him out. The dates were set, but Nick Offerman, having a lot of awareness, didn't want to speak in front of a bunch of Park and Rec professionals about a thing that he only played on TV, right? And so his thing was, I would love to get up in front of these folks, but I'd love to have like a conversation. I don't want to, and I understand that. I've been to athletic business where folks like Emmett Smith, who's a great speaker, is telling you how to do your job. And you're like, I enjoy listening to Emmett Smith talk about things, but he doesn't know how to serve the public in that capacity. And so Nick Offerman was just wanting to say, hey, I'd love to have a conversation about what Parks and Rec is like as the keynote. And that state association thought the best way to manifest that would be to recreate RecLess live on stage, where us 3 knuckleheads would be on stage and would bring Nick Offerman out as our surprise guest as part of their keynote presentation, which is just incredible. On top of all that, in the discussions with the Park and Rec professional we were talking to, they said at one point they sent our episodes, or a link to our episodes, to Nick Offerman and his team to vet us as a group, and they came back and said they listened. Now, I don't know how many episodes they listened to, but to think Nick Offerman was listening to my dumb voice at one time is definitely worthy of being a surprise moment for me for season 1, because I think we were all taken back by that. Ultimately didn't work out because Nick Offerman wanted about 6 figures, and God bless him, I guess he's earned it. But and that was too rich for their keynote budget. But for a moment, we thought we were going to be on stage with Nick Offerman, and in the lie that I tell myself, he was the one that listened to our episodes and not some intern assistant who worked for the representation and listened to our episode. So that was definitely pretty cool for that to even be a possibility.
We have definitely had some cool moments with this podcast that we've put together. And I would say that my most surprising moment of this year has been whenever we started this whole thing off, I listened because I love all three of you guys and I believe in y'all's funny things that y'all say, and I'm here to be supportive. But I think the most surprising thing is how many of the different topics that we've heard and people have talked about that I've been able to take back and apply to my own profession and to my own life and the things that I'm doing. So listening to Ryan Hegrenus talk about AI, and then to be able to brainstorm all the different ways that AI can be used in the field of education, and that I can use it in what I'm doing as far as writing lesson plans or writing out different things that I would be using in the classroom or for different procedures and stuff I was doing. So I think that was definitely really interesting to hear how these different topics that we've talked about and that we've listened to, they've really applied to me. And I'm not in the field of parks and recreation, which has been a really, really cool aspect of this podcast. So we've gone through our favorite moment. We've gone through our most surprising moment. Who was our most surprising guest?
All right, guys, I'm going to keep it with my theme of 2 answers again, but I'm going to keep this one quick for you all. Kathy Capps and Becky Dunlap. You know, similar to what Jay had talked about earlier with Kathy, I enjoy all of our guests, but those were maybe 2 guests that we had in a non-traditional Parks and Rec position. So we had Becky from Barry Dunn, and Becky does parks, so some podcast familiarity there. And then also, Kathy from the state parks gives you some really nice lessons of taking parallels from some really successful people in maybe different industries that are really alongside of ours, but aren't necessarily what we do on a day-to-day.
Well, I'll go next. And my surprising guest has already been mentioned a couple of times, actually, by both you, Shane, and Tom. And it's Jill Geller. And to me, it was, the surprising moment was the only guest the entire season that I did not know at all. I've heard the name, and I actually it was funny. I received an email from her like earlier that day or the day before from the Academy Mentor Program, but still did not know who she was at all, other than just the name and hearing it from the Academy. But it was so enjoyable to learn all the aspects of Jill's career path, her successes, her challenges along the way, her years in the Midwest, and then just making a leap to go to the West Coast is awesome. And it kind of surprised me too, because you don't hear that often, that you're at that stage of your career and you're just going to jump to the other part of the country.
It was really good for me. Yeah. It was not easy. You really hit the nail on the head. It was not easy. I don't think I had mentally prepared myself for that as I should have. But I've always had this mantra of never stop learning. And when I came out here, I was, learning through a fire hose.
So it's exciting to hear that someone did that. And I would, have some opportunity to maybe do that at some point in my career as well. But then we talked about just the quality of life with professionals and different topics. And she talked about managing libraries and just things that we don't always hear about, because not every department does that. So, I loved her stories about her time in the parks and the trails and different programs she talked about. So it was just overall very surprising, because I did not know anything about Jill, and I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed it and look forward to continuing talking to her in the future and seeing her at the next conference.
Yeah, Jill was great. I had a couple names listed down. Kathy reminds me in some ways of we're all old enough now that when you see a friend from high school, it's that weird feeling where you're instantly connecting. You think back, not so much what they're doing now, but what we were doing then. And I don't know why Kathy, more than others, reminds me of that time in the young professional when we were all getting it started and we were working so hard on it. I think partly because she has kind of branched off and is doing her own thing. So now seeing her, there's, this feels like a, 8 or 10 year gap. And it was really cool just to see her. But one of my most surprising guests for y'all was John Stutzman, because I completely screwed up his on purpose to try to throw y'all off the scent, because I don't think there was anything I could say about John Stutzman that y'all wouldn't immediately know. And I think Tom did the same thing for Sarah as well, for the same reasons. But I don't know if it was the anticipation. I had done week 1 or the first episode with Katie, and that had gone really well. And we just didn't know who episode 2 would be. And I don't know why that is, because I have such a high level of respect for Nunes. I think we all do. And I think he would do anything we asked for him. But if you'd have gave me $100, I wouldn't have thought he'd have come on our podcast.
Chris Nunes, our Chief
What's
Operating
up?
Officer from the Woodlands, Texas.
Hey boys, how you doing? Good.
What's going on?
And so to see Nunes on our stupid little podcast, episode 2, no less. So I think one of my biggest surprises of this last season was this second episode when Nunes came on, because I don't know, in some ways it felt a little bit more validating. Like, we've got our little group, and Katie was from that group, and that felt like really comforting and safe, and you could be who we were, but we felt like Nunes was a big name, and that led to other big names with Rosalind, Raga Hegenes, and Nile and the others. And I remember pretty quickly going, oh wow, we've got a lineup of people that I think the industry would be interested in hearing from, and Nunes definitely helped kick that off.
Like you guys, I really enjoyed when Rosalind Johnson came on, and I loved hearing her views on leadership and how she advocates for her department. It was really exciting to hear a very strong woman that was unapologetic in how she approaches her leadership and how she approaches running her people and her departments. I really enjoyed her episode. So that leads us into most inspirational thing heard. And I think I will lead off on that one because it kind of ties out back into Rosalind Johnson. And I loved whenever, I think it was Shane asked, what are some quotes that you live by, or what's something that you kind of guide your life by? And she, without one pause, rattled off like 4 different quotes that she just knew off the top of her head, and was something that she uses as kind of a compass to keep her on the path.
So a couple of things help and guide me. One is well-behaved women rarely make history, and I'm trying to make history. So, sometimes I'm a flip a table. And so no weapon formed against me shall prosper. This too shall pass. My mama didn't raise no fool. And my mother always said, if you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. So, and I remember that I'm Fred Johnson's daughter too. And my father didn't take any crap. And my father, whenever he said I was just as nice as I could be, I'm like, oh, Dad, you cursed him out?
In the same vein, Jody Adams had a quote that she used, which was that pressure is a privilege. And I loved both of those moments.
Well, Hannah, you took both of first of all, Hannah, 2 answers.
I knew that was going to happen.
So it's not that easy, everyone. Rosalind and Jody were the 2 individuals I brought. And the funny thing about that, Hannah, was I jotted down almost exactly what you said, but a couple different tidbits that they gave. And so Rosalind, yes, just rattling off these amazing quotes, words to live by when she's facing adversity, challenges, and just needs to be the leader that she's expected to be. And that was in part of Shane's question, the way he worded it, which is great. And at the end of that, she had mentioned something that her mother had taught her, and that was, if you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. So that was the one out of all of those, because everything she said was amazing. And then for Jody, we were talking about Billie Jean King, and I believe it was Shane. What was the gentleman? Bobby
Riggs, yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about that situation, and she had talked about how Billie Jean had handled the situation and how that applies to everybody. And realistically, it's, no matter what your adversity, no matter what your situation, be humble and graceful.
If you walk in the shoes of being a pro athlete or a director or a superintendent or whatever, be graceful about it. You're so lucky to get to do what you do.
And I love that. I love that sentiment. It was something that was such a great way to end the season. Season 21 was with Jody. So that was towards the end of the episode, but it truly does apply to everything we do. Like she said, pressure is a privilege, and we're fortunate to be in the positions that we are. And so ultimately handling things with grace and humility is it's something that resonates with me.
That's awesome. Those are great examples. when I was thinking about this from the inspirational component, the first thing that came to mind was the conversation with Nathan Fort. And Nathan talked about a lot of really passionate things throughout that conversation, but he talked about a lot of challenges too. And, to hear him discuss the challenges that he's faced, and, some of it was just literally having to move from different parts of the country, financially, emotionally, like how that impacts you. And I don't think we always talk about those challenges. I think we always, we talk about the successes that come from going to this job to that job and promotions, and, but we got it very real that day, and just hearing about the challenges that he's faced going to different parts of the country. And it's not just the emotional toll, but the financial burden and everything else that goes along with that. But he talked about the inspiration that came with it too, that came from his family. And they actually were very positive with him to travel and see the world, which is like really one of the reasons why he was doing some of the traveling and moving around like he did, outside of obviously work and the impact. Then we talked about just like why we do what we do.
I have to tell my employees all the time, I have to look at you as a person first and as an employee second. If I don't, we will not be successful moving forward.
It was a great takeaway that he had talked about all the different experiences that he's had in different positions and how he brings them all together to his current role. So no matter where you go, there'll be challenges, there'll be success stories, but just don't forget where you came from and use that to your advantage to make a bigger impact.
I had two, and it was from two of our more, I would say, esteemed colleagues. Both have done their career in Parks and Rec and now assisting Parks and Rec in other ways. Tom O'Rourke, when he talked about the presentation he did in Mexico City, what came out of that conversation when he was talking about some of those agencies in Mexico don't even have parks, they have steps. And, you just program on the steps, and the concept that we all kind of talked about, that not everyone has parks, but everyone has people. And, we're kind of in a people business was really something I took away from this season. It was very inspirational to think that you can look across and say, oh, well, Round Rock or someone else for us, or Austin has this great blank. And it's not about the parks. It's about the people, right? It's not about what you have to serve with. It's why you're trying to serve people.
It did my heart so good to see people that did the same thing I did with nothing. It's a great profession we have if we just turn it into making everybody a little bit better. It's funny. People are screwed up in this world, and we think they're not. And we think when they drive the nice car and live in the nice house, everything's perfect. No, it's not. And so when I say disenfranchised and the needy, I don't mean people that don't have money. I mean everybody, because everybody's got something. And I think we address it all.
I love the idea that we don't all have parks, but we all have people.
Yeah, right. We all got people. Yeah, that's it.
Joe Turner said something. Joe Turner said about 100 somethings, and we should probably do a book of Joe Turner wordisms. And I love listening to Joe because I've gotten to listen to Joe for a long time, being from Texas, and have held a high level of respect for him. But he said something that fits back in a little bit to what Tom was talking about as well. And he said, red plus blue equals green. And that was doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter who you're serving as far as who you're reporting to necessarily. We are the green side of the politics. And he said green meant money, green meant grass, green meant Parks and Rec. And I think we'll have, we'll have lean years, we'll have strong years, we'll have conservative presidents, we'll have Democratic presidents, we'll have conservative governors and Democratic governors and mayors, et cetera. And all of that will impact something, but none of that should matter. We should be about what matters to us, which is green. And it's taking the resources we have, being really good stewards of them, and applying them our best way possible to serve people and enhance their quality of life. I thought both of those guys gave real great perspectives on how you do that.
I think across the board, as we've gone through this season, as we've had all of our different guests, the thing that has come through the most to me, and especially with me being a person that is outside of the field of parks and recreation, it's not something, I mean, I'm married into it, but at the same time, I'm outside of it, is the belief and the passion and the commitment that every single person in parks and recreation has to being a servant and serving the people that are around them and doing whatever it takes to make sure that the public is taken care of. And I think that is really an inspirational thing that I have enjoyed hearing about all of our guests, that they really they believe in what they do 100%, and they pattern their life in such a way that they do it every single day, and it's really fantastic. With that, our biggest takeaway of this season.
I would say my biggest takeaway is I would encourage people and myself to take more risks, take a chance, do what makes you happy. And just kind of summarizing so many of the conversations that we had throughout season 1, there was a lot of risk takers. And, in a way, I look at this podcast as a risk. We had always talked about, we love hanging out when we get together at conference, and, we may text occasionally. We have our fantasy football chats. We have our, play poker once in a while, all these different things we do. And then we were like, what else can we do to get closer? What else can we do to chat more? And it was totally Shane's idea. So I shouldn't say we, but Shane had this idea. I don't know that he thought we'd really do it and thought that we would both dive into it like Tom and I have. But, it's been amazing and I love it. It's been so much fun, makes me happy. And we need to do that more often. We need to do what makes us happy, be willing to take a chance, take a risk. And in so many of the conversations we had with our guests, that's what has gotten to them where they are in their career. And maybe they took a chance in going to a different role or a different city, or maybe it's taking a chance to go into this profession that wasn't what they planned on doing. It's kind of Jody Adams's story was not about going to play or going to do park and rec for her career. I mean, she could have gone on and been a very successful tennis professional and decided to take a risk. And now look at her, and she's looked at as one of the best of all time. And, everyone loves talking to Jody because she's such a wealth of knowledge. That's kind of how I summarize this show a little bit, or this podcast, is it was a risk, but it's been great. It's made us all happy.
Yeah, Jay, you can't really say it much better than that. Something that I thought of before this, but it really goes along with that theme, and maybe the theme of us getting this show started every week or every time we have a show, and that is make the time for people. I kind of have subscribed to this rule. This is professionally and personal, by the way. This isn't necessarily, I'm talking just in our professional world, but it was just show up. If you're invited to something, it's outside of your comfort zone, be there. You're at a state conference or a national conference. You can either go to your room and catch up on that rest, or go out to whatever social it is or network with people. And so just show up is kind of what I've subscribed to. And making time for people, I'm so appreciative of you all for doing that at this show. That's what ultimately, the premise of this was, and we've done that. And as a result of it, I've become better at that in my personal life and in my professional life outside of the show. What it really came down to was me making the time to do so, which I don't think I was doing before this show. So, that's something I've definitely taken away and has made me better.
Before our podcast, I thought pretty insulated about our industry. I thought about what I was doing at an agency level. I thought about what we all knew each other were doing as a family, and I think something I want to say to all the folks that have supported us, our what we call our YPN family, our little network or tribe of people have been really supportive. We've pulled some for this season. We'll pull some next season. We'll pull some in others, but it's a super supportive group. But I think there was a tendency for me to think that was all the industry was. And what I've learned after this first season is that the Parks and Rec industry is in great hands. And it's in a really good spot. Whether you have 2 NRPA staff that we interviewed, Michael and Haley, they're kind of stewards of our industry, and they're there professionally, full-time, trying to make sure that we don't go off the rails. Or all the thought leaders we've had and the mentors and the people we look up to, from Noons and Kirschman, Janet, to people that like Joe and Tom and Joe Geller and Jody Adams, these other people that we, as I think middle of our careers, have known about for a long time and could look into and lean into for support. I think about all of our colleagues, not just our family members, but, I do think about Sarah and Stutzman and others, the people that are our age going through some of the things we're going through. And even specifically, our 30 under 30 winners, we've got Nate and Maria, and we're in such great shape with those folks coming in, filling up these spaces behind us. Not necessarily director, although Nathan had been director of a small a couple small agencies, but they're coming in and filling these voids as we're stepping into leadership roles. These young professionals coming in after us are doing an amazing job. And you just look at all the people, people like Tiffany Johnson and others that we've grown up with, that we've had people like Tom O'Rourke we always looked up to, and then people like Nathan and Maria that we're looking back, trying to make sure we're paving a way for them. And you think, wow, when you look at the 21 people that we talked to, if that is a good projection of what this industry is overall, and if season 2 can reflect that as well, we're in a great spot. It's a great industry, and it's moving in the right direction. It's just super exciting to see that.
This whole project for me started as a fun project. I got to hang out with you three a little bit more and to be able to hear what was going on every week. And for me, it's definitely been a learning project. I've had to figure out how to use all the different tools and to edit. And we've come a long way from where we started, and I've come a long way from where we started. But I think that ultimately this little project of ours has turned into so much more. And for me, I have become very, very cognizant of the responsibility that I share with you guys of sharing the story of Parks and Recreation. And one of the themes that has been out there so much that we've heard from Tom O'Rourke and from Joe Turner and from some of the others is how much we share a responsibility of telling the story of Parks and Recreation to the next generation and giving access to people for them to realize what this career path offers and the way that they can get involved and do things with their career and their life. So it's I think with this podcast, we're able to provide access to and kind of preserve these leadership lessons that some of our professionals may not ever have a chance to hear if they're not able to get to conference or hear some of these people with keynotes. So to me, it's been a really great, what started off as a fun project has turned into a really great responsibility, and I can't wait to do more of it. So any last thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
I'll say, to add to what I was saying earlier, I think another thing I've been impressed by is how this is for everyone. This is a really diverse. We've had a really diverse slate of speakers, and it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your orientation, your race. This field is a field that you can be successful in, and I think that you can be supported in, that you can be loved in, that you can go out and serve in, and have a network of people that will cheer you on and be there if you fall. And I think that's what's been really cool about all the different folks we've had on for our first season. It's been really cool to see.
Yeah, well said, Hannah. Well said, Shane. I never really thought of it that way, but as a project, it's turned into a responsibility of ours to really tell the story. And if it was the story of the show Parks and Rec, then Jay would be voted off of this island because he wouldn't be any help. And so the last note I'll put on there, and I just want to say I've really enjoyed, and I think we talked about this, was hearing and learning more about people on a personal level. And so for all of you who've shared that with us, I really appreciate that. I hope that our listeners, our guests and listeners appreciate that as well. And for all of the silly stories I get to tell about my family, I love that. I really enjoy that. I mean, people obviously like talking about themselves, but what better way to talk about, your family than something that is broadcast to a bunch of different people who now get to learn that and share those, some of those memories with me.
This has been a great wrap up, and I just look forward to diving back into the next guest that we have coming up soon.
That's right. It's the season of Tom coming up, folks. Buckle in.
I'm excited, and I think we used the word surprise a few times this time around, for this wrap up, and we're gonna carry that theme over into season 2.
About to have to change the name of the podcast. Tom and his friends.
Tom and friends.
Tom season 2.
Thanks so much for letting me be a guest host today. I appreciate y'all letting me have a little corner of this pod today, and I can't wait to see what happens next.
Thanks, Hannah.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you. See y'all.
See you, everyone.
Bye.